And very warm good morning to all of you, online and offline participants. Uh, we are gathered here for the 10 days international training on principles and practice of epidemiology. Online participants, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. So this 10 days training is from today 3rd July to 12th July 2023, and this we organized in collaboration with Penn State University USA under ICR Nahepcast MAPSU project. So it's our pleasure to all of you here for this training program. Now, as I mentioned, sorry for the delay. As you know, here in Mumbai, because today is Monday and traffic. So, but already we have started the pre-assessment test because we can save the time. So that's there now. I will not waste more time. I request Dr. S.D. Ingole sir, Professor, Department of Veterinary Physiology and OPI, uh, ICR Nahepcast MAPSU project to deliver the welcome address. Dr. S.D. Ingole sir, please.
Thank you, Dr. Vaidya. Good morning to all of you. So today with us, we are having chief guest for this 10 days international training program on epidemiology. So Dr. A.T. Sherikar, founder, vice chancellor of MAFSU. We are having with us Associate Dean, Dr. Sarita Gurone, who is also the project coordinator of this NAEPcast. Then I welcome today's distinguished speaker. So for 10 days, he will be with us. And Dr. Bhushan Jairao, who is Director of Animal Diagnostic Laboratory, Penn State University. So it will be a good interaction with him for all the participants who are offline as well as online. So it is my pleasure to welcome you all the dignitaries and the participants for this 10 days training program, which is being conducted under the NAHEPcast, which is a World Bank funded project. So various trainings has been organized under this, and so after a period of this 2.5 years, we thought that what is the burning issue, and then we thought of that epidemiology, which is one of the major thing which I think our country is lacking, and so we thought of bringing the best person for this, who is good in epidemiology, who has done very well in the Penn State and the US itself. And so it is a pleasure that he is with us for these next 10 days. As you know, this epidemiology plays a very crucial role. So these 10 days will be, I think, very crucial for you also, so that you, all the participants, can take these learnings from this course way forward, so that it will be very much useful in the One Health program. So this program has been designed with the aim of equipping the faculties and other participants with various information, skills, tools, and recent advances. And with this, I welcome all of you, the speaker, the dignitaries, the participants, and I hope that these 10 days, it will be great for you all. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, sir, for the nice welcome address. As today is a very good day for all of us because today is the Guru Purnima. So our teachers, our guides are here. So I wish all the faculty members, teachers, a very happy Guru Purnima to all of you. And as Dr. Ingole sir has mentioned, the importance of this training program, because we have requested our course director, Dr. Bhushan sir, that this training is very much important because this course is new, because this is even in PG draft regulations, ICR and even VCI, they have included the syllabus, and this is in veterinary field is very much important because you know this now the many epidemics, pandemics are going on, and for this control of the all these diseases, this epidemiology portion is definitely it will be helpful to all the participants for their teaching methods and for guiding the students for their research work in future generation, also to enhance their analytical and decision making skills, preparing them for real world scenarios and challenges in the future. So now I request our uh, beloved Associate Dean, Madam, Dr. Sarita, Mrs. Sarita Gudone, Madam, Associate Dean as well as Project Implementing Officer, Mumbai Veterinary College, to address the participants. Madam, please.
Respected Dr. A.T. Sherikar sir, who was my professor in my undergraduate days, so he's my guru also. So first of all, sir, Guru Purnimecha तुम्हाला शुभेच्छा. Uh, uh, Dr. Jayarao, Director, Animal Diagnostic Laboratory, Professor at Penn State University, and very renowned researcher, and our ex-alumni also, and other participants. Very good morning to you all, and professors of Bombay Veterinary College. Very good morning to you all. I welcome you all participants for this 10 days international training on principles and practices of epidemiology. As Dr. Ingole has already said, India is lacking in this area, and this type of trainings are very important for India, especially under One Health program. These trainings become extremely important. And when I'm going through the days, 10 days program, what I realize rather than lectures, Dr. Jayara has given a lot of importance to study design, the exercises, and that makes it more practical. The training becomes more practical, and so all the participants will be able to use it in their research and practices while they are teaching the students as well as when they are carrying out the research work. So I'm sure this 10 days training will help benefit all. And I again congratulate all NAHIB team for organizing such trainings. I will not name specifically people because it's a teamwork. Dr. Jhende, of course, is a PI, but all team people are working very diligently and arranging so many trainings on a routine basis. So I congratulate them all for arranging such great trainings, and I thank especially Dr. Jayara who flew all the way from US here to conduct this training. So thanks to you again, and best wishes to all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam, for your encouragement and always guidance to us for organizing such events. Now, this is the time to felicitate our today's dignitaries. Now, I request our Associate Dean, Madam, to felicitate today's our chief guest as well as President of the function and founder, Vice Chancellor of our university, Dr. A.T. Kisirikar, sir. Now, I request Madam by giving shawls, referred, and bouquet. I request Budone Madam to felicitate our course director and instructor, Dr. Bhushan Jairao, sir, by giving shawls, referred, and bouquet. Yeah. I request now Dr. S.D. Ingole, sir, welcome our Associate Dean, Madam, by giving bouquet. Thank you, sir. Okay, sir. Okay. So now I kindly request today's program chief guest and president of today's function, respected Dr. A.T. Serikar, sir, founder, vice chancellor, M- Maharashtra Animal and Fishery Sciences University, to address the participants. Serikar, sir, please.
The associate dean of the college, Dr. Sarita, my colleague as well as student, we have a long association, in fact, who is now director at Penn State University, Dr. Bhushan. Actually, he is really a Bhushan to this college and this department. We all are proud of him. Dr. Ingole, of course, all of them, they are my students. I do not know many of you. Maybe you may be from Mapsu, you may be from outside, I don't know. But these, they are sitting this side, they are my students. All of you are from Mapsu. I'm sorry.
Students as well as faculty.
Yeah, yeah. Very good. Dr. Patil, Dr. Gaikwad, Dr. Vaidya, and all of you, the participants in this hall, as well as those who are participating online. It is a really pleasure for me. The thing is that first is this is my own department. And I have seen this department from its birth. Being, it is not exaggerated, but I will being a creator of this department when I was a student. And then subsequently I'm becoming, it was a coincidence. I was to go to surgery, but I became the student of this department, then subsequently employed here, worked in different capacities in this department. So, looking at all this development, first, before going to that, I'm not, of course, going to take much of time because I made this your program little bit or probably derailed. Am I correct, Dr. Bhushan? I was late. I was held up in traffic. There were some problems. So, at the outset, I thank your Associate Dean, Dr. Jhende, Dr. Vaidya, for having me invited for this function. And that too, as a chief guest, I'm actually host, basically. That is what I was to tell you. And when Dr. Bhushan is here, as I told you, he's a Bhushan for my department. I'm very much proud of him. So it was indeed my pleasure to be with him also. And when he is going to actively participate and giving you, delivering lectures for all the 10 days, and I know how much you are going to get from him. So this was an opportunity I wanted to discuss with you all, as well as Dr. Bhushan. So I thank the organizers for having me invited for this function. Besides, of course, this is my alma mater, Bombay Veterinary College, as well as the department, as I told you. It was another happiness to come here and visit the department. As my memory goes, I tell you, this department started in 74, 75 in one small room, 10 by 10. And I was a student. Why creator or this department? I thought because I was a little bit active in students' life also. So there was a demand from the student council that their department of this, that time what we call as food hygiene and public health and political science should be started in this college, because these departments were already existing in some of the colleges in the country. So that is how, and we succeeded. It was university decided, government gave the approval to start the department in 74. And as I told you, I became incidentally the student of this department. So naturally, I have a very close this thing, affinity, what we call. I keep on coming to this department whenever on this side, but normally in the evening hours because I don't want to trouble these boys who are working. When I come here, come to the college, I feel nice. So this is also a nice occasion. As far as your topic is concerned, epidemiology. See, epidemiology is a very important subject in our veterinary profession or medical profession. And it was so important. I actually, being a professor, I came to know when we were writing a book on elements of veterinary public health. And I was the chief author of that book. And I was not in a position because some our other members were there insisting, no, we must include in epidemiology part in veterinary public health. Without epidemiology, the subject cannot be completed. So we were searching for a person and we were not getting. And ultimately somebody suggested from IVRI, then you have best epidemiologist in your college. And that was Dr. Somat. Although he is from the man of this medicine, then I requested him whether he will write something on epidemiology. Then both of us, we were writing, and that took nearly 6 months to get the information, and then we could prepare a chapter for about 10 pages or 20 pages. I don't remember now in that book. So that time, and then of course we started how it is important, and we were in touch with the experts outside the country also. And then a subject we started teaching. Actually, Dr. Paturkar was also teaching epidemiology. So epidemiology, and it proves its benefits when the epidemics like what we faced recently, in such calamity, how epidemiology is important. And I tell you, I was insisting all the while that Bombay Veterinary College, Nagpur, Parvani, all the veterinary colleges should have we should do epidemiological work for this that last epidemic. Unfortunately, that did not work. There was some project. Dr. Maisekar was the commissioner at Pune. He gave to Shirwar Veterinary College. Dr. Vaskar was doing some work. Ultimately, that the laboratory did not come up. I don't know the reasons. And Nagpur, they have done some work. So this is very important field. And our veterinarians must learn epidemiology and also propagate and work on epidemiological field. And Dr. Jayarao Bhushan is here. He's an expert in epidemiology. Of course, he's expert in many disciplines. You will come to know in next few or 10 days or something. I'm very happy that this topic has been there. Organize a small international training program. When we talk about international training program or something like that in this college or this university, I feel really happy. Such many more programs should come in each of the discipline. What, madam?
Sir,
You should have.
programs that is
In every department, not in Bombay Veterinary College, but as a whole university. So a person like me will be a most happiest person if you are internationally. I tell you, when I was VC, this Bush and Paturkar, they came to America. I never took any permission from government. On my own responsibility, I was sending all the people abroad. When the proposal used to come, and nobody opposed me. No government, no purpose. Out of the country, I was informed. No, even secretary, no minister. I was telling, I am the head of my university. I will take all the decisions. So, in a joke, I was talking to someone recently. It is out of context, of course. Here, our new vice chancellor is coming, and it was I was very sad person. So somebody told me no person in our university is qualified to become or was eligible in this process. The reason given was because although they are professors, they don't have experience as a head, something like that. Somebody told me. Head. And these associate deans, they are also are not qualified because of their experience. Like and required experience they don't have. So recently, we have some assessment program done by the government for MAPSU, wherein whatever heads post in our college, 5 heads post, they were diverted somewhere else. I was telling them not to accept this assessment because our university has already been assessed. The thing has been settled. Let us work for 10 more years as per the government rules and then assess. But the thing did not work. We lost, and we lost the opportunity. 5 people would have become eligible probably. Anyway, so this training program, I suppose, will be of great, immense value to you. I wish you all the best and best of luck to this program, international program. And I'm happy. I welcome Dr. Bhushan. Of course, he's our own person, but he has come and he'll be taking the classes. He's been helping this college a lot. So once again, I thank you all for inviting me and listening to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir, for your excellent information and knowledge sharing about this epidemiology and why this training is important. As you have guided us, always your valuable guidance, support, encouragement, and inspiration is with us. You are the source of inspiration to all of us, and we are here because of your all efforts. We are sitting here as all your we can misunderstand that your feelings. So once again, thank you very much. In spite of your all health and other issues, are still you are coming and always guiding us. Thank you once again. As our course director and PI, Dr. Jhende sir, he is busy. He is at Delhi, but still he is also joining with us tomorrow morning. He will come. He is busy in another meeting in Delhi. So now at the end, I request Dr. Rajashree Patil Madam to propose the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Dr.
No.
Vaidya.
No.
Very good morning and a warm welcome to all. On behalf of Maharashtra Animal and Fishery Sciences University, Nagpur and Mumbai Veterinary College, Mumbai, I extend a very hearty vote of thanks to all the dignitaries, speakers, staff, students and participants for joining us today for 10 days international training program on principles and practice of epidemiology, organized in collaboration with Penn State University under ICR NAHEP CAST project. First and foremost, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to Chief Patrons, Dr. S.R. Gadak, Honorable Vice Chancellor, MAPSU Nagpur, and Dr. R.C. Agrawal, DDG Education, and National Director, NAHEP ICR New Delhi, for their unwavering support and commitment for organizing such programs. I would like to thank patrons of today's program, Dr. Anuradha Agarwal, National Coordinator, NAHEP CAST ICR New Delhi, University authorities, Dr. S.V. Upadhyay, and Dean, Dr. N.V. Kurkure, Director of Research, Dr. A.U. Bikane, Director of Extension Education, and Dr. P.G. Vasni, Dean, Faculty of Dairy Technology, MAFSU Nagpur, for their constant support and guidance. I would like to take this opportunity to express my gratitude to Chief Guest of today's program, respected Dr. A.T. Shirikar, Founder Vice Chancellor, MAFSU, for accepting the invitation, gracing the occasion, addressing the gathering, and for guiding us always. I would like to thank the guest of honor of today's program, Dr. S.V. Gulane, our beloved Associate Dean and Project Implementing Officer, for her constant support, help, and guidance in organizing this training. I express my deep sense of gratitude to respected Bhushan Jayarao sir, Director Animal Disease Diagnostic Laboratory, Penn State University, USA, Course Director, eminent distinguished speaker, for designing such a valuable training program and accepting the invitation, without whom this training would not have been possible. Sir, we are really fortunate to have you here and learn from you. Thank you so much, sir. I would like to thank the PI and course director, Dr. R.J. Jinde, for painstaking efforts in planning and executing the whole training program. I also thank the organizing secretaries, Dr. William Vaidya, Dr. R.V. Gaikwad, co-organizing secretaries, and all co-PI of NAHIP cast who have taken a lot of efforts for this training program. I extend my thanks to all the participants who have registered for this training program all across the country. Last but not the least, I appreciate the efforts taken by VPH and NAHIP team, all the staff members and students of Mumbai Veterinary College. Thank you one and all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, madam, for very nice vote of thanks. Now, I will give brief introduction about our course director as well as instructor for this 10 days training program. I will read some because online participants are also there. That's why. Huh?
It's there in next slide.
Okay.
Yeah. Please introduce it.
Yeah. Okay. So as we have with us Dr. Bhushan Jayarao sir, resident director, Pennsylvania Animal Diagnostic Laboratory, and he is working as professor in the Department of Veterinary and Biomedical Sciences, Penn State University, USA. He graduated from our college, Mumbai Veterinary College, Mumbai, and with a Bachelor of Veterinary Science. He was a gold medalist that time and a master's in veterinary public health here in this department, and masters of public health in occupational and environmental health in 1994 from the University of Tennessee. Then he did PhD from the University of Veterinary Sciences in Budapest, Hungary. His specialties include epidemiology, newly emerging infectious diseases, veterinary public health, and food safety, where he has played a key role in creating extension education and research programs. He created two courses, molecular epidemiology and epidemiology of infectious diseases. Extensive teaching experience, more than 40 years. He is engaged in teaching. Served as an elected member on the American Veterinary Medical Association's Councils for Veterinary Public Health and Regulatory Affairs, and as a panel manager for the USDA's National Integrated Food Safety Initiative. He has published many research articles in various international journals. He has been honored with many awards and member of several organizations. So with this very brief introduction, because sir has many achievements, it will take more than 1 hour to say, read the informations. So it's our really a great pleasure and honor to us that sir is with us. Now, yeah. Uh, I think after 5-10 minutes, we will then continue the session. I think with this permission of chair, this I declare that this inaugural function is over. You want to say something about group photo? Yeah, get introduction and all.
Okay, so with this, I think we are coming up with the end of this inaugural function, and I declare this inaugural function to be end. And before starting today's session, so I will first request the offline participants to introduce them, and then later on I will request all the online participants to switch on their videos so that we can take photographs. Thank you. So I just request the offline participants to introduce themselves.
Good morning, sir. I'm Dr. Edina Ringrekar from Department of Veterinary Parasitology from Mumbai Veterinary College.
Good morning. Myself, Dr. Meera Sakre, Assistant Professor, Veterinary Medicine, Kovas, Parbhani.
Udgir in the Department of Veterinary Public Health.
Good morning, sir. Myself, Dr. Gopal Bharkar, Associate Professor, Department of Veterinary Parasitology.
Good morning, sir. Myself, I'm Dr. Pramod Mishra, Assistant Professor in the Department of Veterinary Pathology, Mumbai Veterinary.
Good morning, sir. Myself, Dr. Ranjit Ingole. I am working as the Assistant Professor in the Department of Veterinary Pathology, Postgraduate Student of Veterinary and Animal Sciences, Akola.
Good morning. I'm Dr. Govind Gangane, Associate Professor of Veterinary Pathology from College of Veterinary and Animal Sciences, Parbhani.
Good morning. Myself, Dr. Rupesh Wagmare. I'm working as Assistant Professor in Department of Veterinary Public Health at College of Veterinary Sciences, Parbhani.
Good morning, sir. My name is Dr. Balaji Kondre. I am Assistant Professor, Department of Veterinary Pathology, Kovas, Udgir.
Good morning, sir. Myself, Dr. Gajendra Bhangale. I am Assistant Professor at Veterinary College, Parbhani, in the discipline of Veterinary Parasitology.
Good morning, sir. I am Dr. Rahul Suryavanshi, working as Assistant Professor at College of Veterinary Animal Sciences, Udgir, in the discipline of Veterinary Public Health. I am a proud student of Dr. Jairav. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Someone.
Good morning, one and all. Yeah, I'm Dr. C.N. Galdar. Sir, I'm working as Assistant Professor and Radiological Safety Officer at Department of Veterinary Clinical Medicine, Veterinary Nuclear Medicine, including Radioisotope Laboratory. I'm thankful to VPS team and NIAP team for accepting we people as a participant for this birthday training program. And again, one more submission from my side. Those participants who are interested to visit my laboratory, Radioisotope Laboratory, behalf of my department, my associate dean, and my professor, I invite all of you to see that classical facility of Radioisotope Laboratory. With this, thank you very much.
I request the online participants to switch on your videos. So that our course director should also know who the participants are online. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Akruti is there and Samiksha.
So now I request Dr. Bhushan, the IS is yours now for 10 days. And also the participants.
I did do my part when I started.
Yeah.
So over to Dr. Bhushan.
So, welcome to this 10-day workshop on epidemiology. I'm sure you're going to go over what poster stages. Invite you all, the ones that are present in this group, and also the ones that are online. Thank you so much for taking the time to attend and participate in this 10-day course. As earlier mentioned, many parts of the course is a roller coaster. Some days things may come very easily for you and may click on the point of the time, but some may be lingering issues that you may have to ponder upon for a longer time to get a better appreciation of what we were talking about. So that's one aspect of looking at it. Now, in order to make the course very effective, the way I've organized is I have lectures and I have class exercises. So what we will do is in the class exercise portion, we will actually present case problems or problems that you will solve as a group or individually, and I will request the answer from you. So many a times you may have questions at that point in time. Why didn't we include a certain number in the denominator? Why are we expressing this as a rate, not as a proportion? So these are some of the things that usually will come up as a sort of a clarification in the process. And this will kind of reinforce some of the ideas that you already have. So as the course progresses, it becomes more and more cumulative in the approach. So the way we do this, by the end of the 16th lecture, you'll be able to actually develop an SIR model, a disease model by yourself. So that's the whole concept, is we'll raise the bar from every lecture to lecture till you come to a point in time when somebody throws at you an SIR model. You can say, when it's going to peak and when I'm going to see a resolution of the disease. So those are some of the things that we expect the outcomes as a part of this workshop. I'm very laid back, I'm very relaxed. So feel free, ask questions. This is an interactive group. That's what I really wanted. I want people to talk, express their ideas. There's no right answer, there's no wrong answer. So if you are shy to talk, you are the loser. So let me tell you that up front. You need to participate, you need to engage. And that's the way we learn. Even I will learn from hearing you, what you have to say in the class. So as I mentioned, I'm pretty laid back. I would like you to understand the methods and the techniques that I share with you, especially when it comes to epidemiologic tools that we will all apply. With that, I will stop here. And if you have any questions up front, I'm ready to start from here, or we can wait, say, another 15 minutes at 11:45. I can then start off with my portion of my talk. So is that acceptable to all, or you have any questions? Anybody on? Okay, those who are on chat line, I would highly encourage you to put your questions through the chat, and we will do our best. I can't guarantee you, but we will do our best to kind of go through the question that you posed and give you an answer at the end of the session. The other thing that I will be doing is I don't like to share with you my PowerPoint presentations, because it so happens it becomes a kind of a distraction. And I usually post my PowerPoint presentations as a PDF at the end of the lecture. So by the end of today, sometime around 7 o'clock, you will see a PDF that comes into your inbox. Okay. So that's the way I approach, unless and until you want it a little different. Happy to explore those approaches too. Any questions? If not, let's take a break for another 10 minutes, and then by 11:45, I will start my lecture. Okay. Thank you. Just take a break because they're doing their self-assessment. So that'll give them time to finish.
Now that I said that we start.
Yeah. Pre-assessment. It was not circulated throughout the country. But there is no physical presence from any other colleges other than Mapu. Acha, 25. So this online, but online it must be open to everyone.
Is looking at the causes of disease, infectious diseases, the patterns of infectious diseases from 4 different aspects. The first one is the biology of the infection. We'll look at the risk factors associated with transmission. We look at the dynamics of transmission, and then look at the evolutionary dynamics. So when I use the word evolutionary dynamics, many a times we fail to include evolutionary aspects of the disease in order to give it a fuller meaning. So what we will do is, the first thing is to understand what is the biology, what is the risk for transmission, what are the transmission dynamics, and then we'll end up with talking about evolutionary dynamics. That's in the first phase. So that will take me about 3 or 4 lectures to cover that aspect. Then we will start talking about quantitative tools. How do you measure rates, risks, ratios? How do you calculate odds ratios, relative risk? How do you study, develop a study design? What type of study design is most applicable to the kind of investigation you would like to do? Okay? In that, we will explore the processes of how we can use these quantitative tools. Then finally, we'll talk about the biological, environmental, social, and political factors that underlie the control of many infectious diseases. Time and time through history, we know when there is a pandemic or when there's an epidemic, there are forces that tend to prevent it from being controlled. Some may be cultural reasons, some may be lack of knowledge, or some may be just total opposition to the concept of using something foreign. Okay? So those are some of the things that we will talk about, weave into our discussion in order to appreciate the epidemiology of infectious diseases. And then whenever we talk about epidemiology, the focus is, the most important focus of epidemiology is to control and prevent diseases. That's all we do in epidemiology. We don't treat diseases, we prevent and control. So that has to be kept in mind. Anything we are talking about in infectious disease, when we talk about prevention and control, we draw in some of our epidemiologic inferences in order to make that happen. So usually I would recommend the following 2 textbooks. So my course that I teach in epidemiology is very broad. It covers humans, it covers animals, it covers the environment. Because we are not doing justice by talking just epidemiology of animals. You need to broaden your perspective in trying to understand how some of these tools, how some of these risk factors, transmission factors go into play. Especially, we are in a time when we are looking at what type of programs we are looking at. One Health programs, right? So when we talk about One Health, these applications of learning tools that we can use in environmental epidemiology, human epidemiology, animal health epidemiology, and bringing them together is the sole focus. So the first book is actually the one that I would recommend, Nelson's book. It's a very good book on infectious disease epidemiology. I believe they have now come with their 8th edition, from what I know. And even if you're not going to be doing epidemiology, I would highly encourage you to online subscribe to the dictionary of it. So it not only provides you with an explanation of the term, but also gives you an example that makes you understand better. Okay, so at least try and see if you can lay your hand on a used book, or if you can get it online, the Dictionary of Epidemiology by Porta. So this particular class, you will very quickly realize, is an interactive class. If you don't talk, I'll make you talk over a period of time. So that's the process. I would like you to interact, like you to work together when we share some problems. And attending these lectures, we would highly recommend. In case if you miss one day, that's understandable if you're sick or not well. So your participation is highly encouraged. Okay, there are several aspects of the class that are designed to be interactive, and the participation in the class discussions is highly encouraged. So we would encourage you to participate. This is the whole thing. That's a new way of learning things. So participants, you have already introduced yourself. So we can abort the process. Your expectations, we will know as we go along the course. I will be able to do better. But before I go and do something, I'm sure everybody on the table must be pretty curious. What does this person do for a living? Who is he? So it's better it comes from the horse's mouth rather than Vilas or somebody else telling me about it. Let me tell you about myself. So I can do that in a set of 4 slides. So I was raised in Mumbai. I was born in Hassan, Karnataka, and my parents moved to Mumbai in 1952. I studied in Bandra in St. Teresa's High School. I did my undergraduate inter-science from Mitibai College, what we call as the Sweet Lady College. And then I tried to get into medical school. I didn't get. I was admitted to the veterinary school. I graduated in 1980. I did my master's in public health in 82. I was a practitioner also in Mumbai. I had my clinic in Pali Hill. And then I served as an assistant professor from 82 to 86. So in this collective experience, I would say from 80 to 86, how best can I summarize? Okay, so these were some of the most fascinating and formative years. It's like a very raw individual or a raw fruit trying to gain its color and its sweetness. So this is the process. So what really happened to me was, I can summarize in 2 settings. One is good clinical practice. I was exposed to good clinical practice and some outstanding physicians. In addition to that, I started recognizing the importance of hypothesis-driven research. So you know practice, you have an understanding of what a practice should be. You have an understanding how do you design and hypothesis-driven research. You may not be an expert, at least it gives you the tracks to move on. So many a times, that's what I would highly encourage you as professors in a classroom setting, is to encourage them to think with a clinical background. And then when it comes to applications, ask them to see if this clinical background can be utilized with good hypothesis-driven research. Okay? So those are the 2 components that I was very proud that I was able to learn all these things. So it happens, I wanted to be happily married, settle down, and I got married, settled down, but things didn't go the way I wanted. I got an ICR senior fellowship to do PhD in Budapest. So I was there in Budapest from 86 to 89, and I did my research work looking at asymptomatic salmonella infections in pig herds in Hungary. And I remember, yes.
of all, really very impressive resume, which I explained right now from your presentation. Here you mentioned about the Hungary. When we are seeing the academic profile of European country, whatever the senior people like you, they have mostly opted Hungary as a place to undertake higher education. So, any specific reason for that, or
It is the government of India and government of Hungary exchange.
okay, apart from this, sir, any other thing?
So in addition to veterinary medicine, in looking at public health, they have their strengths are in isotope chemistry and theoretical physics. So many people from India go to Hungary to do in veterinary public health, isotope chemistry, and physical.
So as per the promising upliftment as per the veterinary education is concerned during 1982 to 86 or in the 1990 era and current era, is there any difference or?
I cannot do the comparisons.
No.
I can only talk about my period. Okay, so does that make sense?
Yes.
Because I don't know what's going on now. So it's wrong on my part to comment. I can tell you when I worked, I was very fortunate to work with some of really extraordinary citizens. And they had come up through real difficult times, with the Second World War, through the Hungarian Revolution, and they were good scientists, really good, hardworking scientists. That's where I was able to understand the importance of what we call as basic science, and then taking translational science and seeing how we can utilize it to make it translate. We found a protein that has an effect on reproductive function, but how do you make it work in a clinical setting? Right? So those are some of the aspects that I was able to understand a lot better during my PhD work, because we were encouraged to interact, exchange with other students in the PhD program. And this program was very small, close to 40 students. 40 students from these three different disciplines: isotope chemistry, veterinary public health, and theoretical physics. So let's move on to the US. I'm moving further west. So on finishing of my PhD, I got a position as a postdoctoral research fellow. And then I became a clinical assistant professor in his lab. So when I worked with Steve's lab, I kind of started beginning to appreciate the importance of technological innovations as to be applied to medical research. What are some of the applications? Classic example was, at that point in time, the PCR machine had just come. We had a PCR machine in the lab. Somebody had to run it, so I put my hands and started running it. And believe it or not, it was a PCR machine that was water cooled. And making primers and probes would take 3 weeks before you would get it into your lab. So, of course, those are some technological innovations, but we were able to find, utilizing these techniques, where the mutations are taking place in the gene. How can we identify the silent and active mutations coming in the process? So it's kind of bringing the technological advance to applying it to where you would like to see it placed in a clinical setting. And then it so happened, me and my wife decided we needed real jobs. So we were offered positions in South Dakota State University. So I joined as an assistant professor in dairy science department. And the process that really started was, I was new. There was nobody to help me. There was nobody to tell me. They said, here's your startup funds, develop a program, teach these courses, and you're good to go. So I developed a brand of extension program called as extension-driven research. In other words, is you have a problem on the field, you have a problem on the farm. You bring that problem into your lab, find the solution, take it back, and see if that really works. So this is largely turnkey-based projects. A classic example, a dairy farmer with 3,000 cows is having a calf mortality rate, which you would like to be under 2%, is running to 6 to 7%. How do you solve that problem? How do you approach that problem? Looking at such a large herd, and when we look at the annuity processes, the amount of loss is significantly high. How can we reduce it? What are some of the factors that are contributing towards the disease? What kind of study design will you employ in order to come and assure the dairy producer that techniques that we will be employing will help him in the long run to reduce the calf mortality. So those were my models which I used. And largely I utilized those extinction-driven problems to improve income. So my work, which I did, luckily, got recognized by Penn State, and they offered me a position in 1998, and I joined them. Since then, I've not left. So I'm still there. So it's been the most enjoyable part of my career. The last 25 years has been just wonderful and a very productive period of my life. So with that, what else I do beyond my life beyond science? So for me, it's me and my family. Hum do, hamare do. We used to read these boards when I used to sit in a BST bus. It used to be at the back of the bus. I don't see it anymore, but that was very exciting to me. Friends and community. We live in a small community in State College of 120,000 people, about 100 Indian families. It's a small group, so we interact. I love to cook, entertain. I'm a yoga instructor, and through my ancestry, I'm also a Vedic astrologer. I love to read science fiction novels. I like to watch movies, especially cartoons. And my most recent hobby is, in the last 8 years, is to explore bike trails. Okay, we do bike trails, and this is a bike trail we did that was 27 miles. So we did 27 miles one way and 27 miles the other way. So this is about me in a nutshell. Okay, so if there's somebody tells you something else and don't believe them, I got everything for you on this slide. So okay, so with that, let's talk epidemiology. Any questions? Okay, so what I've done is I've organized the lectures in order to make it a little bit more fun. Is many of you must be pretty much if you would like to see dramas or acts and plays. I'm one of them. Just because my kids were in acting and playing in school, I got attracted to it. So the way I've presented my set of lectures is a 3-act play. In the first act, know thy enemy and know thy friends. Very important. Okay? You need to know who are the players in the field. So some may be your friends, some may be your enemies. In order to understand that, we'll start off with doing the introduction to epidemiology. We'll then talk about the history of epidemiology, because history tells us a lot, and how we can use this to improve ourselves over time. We'll then jump in and talk about the general principles of epidemiology, and then we'll talk about data presentation. You may be an excellent scientist, you may be a Nobel Prize winner, but if you don't know how to present your data or interpret your data, it doesn't mean anything. So that's extremely important. More so, it's with epidemiology. When you are putting out a statement about related to an outbreak, how do you present it? What are some of the things that have to be there in it so that people don't misunderstand it or take it from a different angle or different perspective? Okay, so those are some of the things that I will highlight in the first act. In the second act is know thy enemy's strengths and weaknesses. Just not knowing who they are. What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? So in order to address this issue, we will talk about measures of disease frequency. There are several different ways how we can measure these frequencies. Then we'll talk about epidemiologic models. We'll talk about the issues of bias and confounding. You may send a student to collect data on a farm, and it may so happen that why am I collecting the length of the year of all these buffaloes in this? They are virtually 7 inches to 8 inches or 8.5 inches. Why do I have to spend the last 3 hours collecting? So he may fudge the data. So what kind of bias is introduced? Collection data.
They said this.
Randomly write the numbers down. So these are some of the things that when we talk about bias and confounding, how do we address these biases? What are the different kinds of bias? and how do you eliminate those biases so that you collect proper data. Right? So that's we'll talk about biases in confronting. Then we'll talk about okay.
Online participants, can you hear?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, okay. Okay, thank you.
Thanks for the check. So then we'll talk about how do you sample. Following sampling, we'll talk about study designs. This is what we call as you have crossed the 50% line in epidemiology once you understand how to design studies based on the type of the issue you're going to work around. And the last one is we call it as the Queen's Gambit. Another word is, I think you will tell me. So in Queen's Gambit, we will talk about diagnostic screening, surveillance, disease outbreak, and then disease modeling. So what's Queen's Gambit? Anyone? Any chess player? Anyone? So the Queen's Gambit is a very unique move amongst chess players. So usually you start with the white. The white has moved. Oops. Yeah, okay. So the move generally is, when we look at it, is when the white moves, he goes to the 4 points, D4. And what does the black do? He brings it to D5. Right? Then what's the next move? The next move is to move C4. And that's called as Queen's Gambit. Reason is he has opened up for moving his very highly mobile elements. One is the horse, and another is the country. Another is the king stays exposed here. So you can see we can finish the game in 8 moves. And if you are not a good player, in 12 moves. So under 8 moves and even under 5 moves, you can finish this game. So that's called as Queen's Gambit. That's where you choke your enemy and say, you're done, right? So that's what the approach we will take in our course today. Okay, so this is the kind of thing that I've laid out for the entire course, but we can work around this a little bit as we go along. So with that, we'll start off with the very first lecture, Introduction to Epidemiology, okay? Any questions? Anything on the top of your mind? And if you don't have, just make a note of it, and we can collectively talk about it at some point.
Yeah. Online participants, any questions, please? Okay, no questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
So in this lecture, we will talk about the process of defining epidemiology. That's the first one. Try to understand the term by itself. We'll then talk about the specific objectives of epidemiology. We'll then differentiate between epidemiology and clinical medicine. So many a times people don't tend to have a very clear understanding between the two processes. Then we'll talk about the natural history of disease. How do we utilize that to understand epidemiology? And what is epidemiology primarily focused on? What do we focus on in epidemiology? Prevention and control. Perfect. So what we do is we take the natural history of the disease and then see where we can apply the prevention and control practices. So that's why it becomes very important in order to know thy enemy, know thy weapons, and then finally it's the Queen's Gambit. So we utilize natural history to develop control and prevention and control practices. Then we'll talk about what are some of the different applications of epidemiology. Okay, so when we talk about the term epidemiology, it's derived from the Greek vocabulary. So we can split it up into three words, three separate words. The first word, epi, means upon. When we talk about demos, it means the people of the population. And when they say logos, the study of. So it is the study of the people. Does not define whether it's infectious diseases, non-infectious diseases. In general, the whole word epidemiology is study upon the people. Okay? So the very question that one will ask is, why does disease develop in one population, not the other? Can I use my finger on this? Anyone here? Okay, leave it here. Can I use the board here? So the question, very basic question in epidemiology we ask is, why does disease or injury develop in one set of people, one group, as compared to the others? So in that, we start off with population. Then in this particular population, we further subjugate into two groups, one with disease and one without disease. What we do, we compare the characteristics between these two groups in order to understand why does the disease occur in one and not the other? What are some of the protective factors that prevent the individuals from not getting the disease? And while those are the ones that get the disease, what are the risk factors for it? Okay, so we can take the same concept, is taking a population, putting it into two subgroups, and trying and studying those two subgroups in order to make the meaning as to why the disease occurs or does not occur. Okay. So let's now really delve into the definition of epidemiology. So epidemiology is defined as the study of the distribution and determinants of health-related states or events in specified populations and the application of the study to control health problems. So you really kind of, when you start looking at it, says, where do I start breaking this definition? So in order to understand epidemiology, let's try and understand the terms that I've highlighted in red that will kind of help you build or tend to better appreciate the definition of epidemiology once we have covered it. So what do we mean by distribution? So, okay, we'll come to that. So again, before we talk about the intricacies of the definition of epidemiology, epidemiology is considered as a part of the basic science of public health. We cannot do public health if you don't have an epidemiology component. It's critical. Okay? So it's data-driven and relies on systematic and unbiased approach to the collection, analysis, and interpretation of data. It's a method for causal reasoning for developing and testing hypotheses grounded in scientific fields such as biology, behavioral sciences, physics, ergonomics to explain health-related events in health-relevant event states and events. So here, one of the things that we really know is we cannot take on a public health program unless and until you have a very strong epidemiology component related to it. Okay, so from the definition of epidemiology, let's try and understand what do we mean by the word distribution in the definition. So the word definition of distribution, it refers to the frequency frequencies, how many times that events occur, and what's the pattern of the health events in that given population. So further down, distribution relates to frequency and patterns. So let's talk about frequency a little bit more in detail. Frequency refers not only to the number of health events, such as the number of cases of meningitis or diabetes in the population, but also the relationship to the size of the population. In other words, let me introduce you to the concept of relationship between the size, the numbers of the cases and size of the population. Similar numerator and the denominator. So here we introduce the concept of we have to have a numerator and a denominator that represents the population. It can be the population at risk, or population that is sick, or population that has deceased. So depending on what type of population that goes into the denominator. And the one in the numerator actually shows the number of cases. So this is what we really have to conceptualize when we talk about distribution. We generate these numbers to identify which of them are in the numerator, which of them are in the denominator. Okay, is this clear? Okay, so what we do, go ahead and then talk about is the pattern. What is pattern? Pattern refers to occurrence of health-related events, person, place, and time. Without person, place, and time, epidemiology doesn't exist. That's the Atma of epidemiology. So we cannot compute, we cannot do any epidemiologic analysis if I just have person and time. I don't have the place. How can I read? It's like three legs of a stool. So you need information from all these three different areas in order to develop an epidemiologic model, or help you to do some descriptive epidemiology to help you generate hypotheses. Okay? So that's what we look at it here. For example, when we look at in the very first place, it tells us persons. When we talk about persons, or it can be an animal, we require information on the age, sex, race, and ethnicity. In place, geographic location, where is it occurring? What is the level of proximity of there's a clustering of events? For example, here in the very first case, we know when we look at the number of individuals in terms of numerator, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 clusters, 7 clusters here. And here we have 1 cluster. So that's how we would look at it in terms of the frequency of occurrence. When we talk about the place, we look at the disease occurring more in the southern regions of America as compared to the rest of the world. Next, further down, when we talk about time, time is over a period of time, where did the same disease occur over the period? So these aspects, person, place, and time, should be virtually etched on your mind, because without this, I cannot do any epidemiological analysis. Okay? That's the first thing you need to know. It's like sending a student to a farm and saying, collect me data on disease. And poor student forgets to take the date, or forgets to bring in certain other forms of information which is needed to create the epidemiologic picture. Okay? So it's very important that we focus on person, place, and time. And I will haunt you with this probably every third or fourth slide. So please bear with me. Okay, next. So the next word is determinant. Yes.
As pattern means how it spreads from one person.
Let me go back. So when we talk about pattern relates to the occurrence of health events based on person, place, and time. So we need to look into the person, place, and time in order to develop a pattern. Without any one of them, we are not able to do it.
Yeah, when we are talking about time, we are thinking about different time.
At different time intervals.
If I'm thinking about a single organ, how will be spreading the pattern?
We will come to that. We will come to that when we do data presentations. Here, the concept is largely to say when we see a pattern, the pattern needs to contain person, place, or animals, place, and so that's the way we approach it. We'll talk about that when we talk about data presentation parts of it. Yeah.
Definition includes the distribution and data. Comes to the pattern. Are related with the determinants again.
No. I'm coming to the next slide. I'm coming to the next slide. Okay. So the word determinant. So what does the word determinant tell us? The determinant are physical, biological, social, cultural, and behavioral factors that influence the occurrence of the disease or health related. What is the word here? Influence. Okay. Those are the actual events that took place. Yeah, we are not interested in that. No, that's different. That is looking at when we talk about distribution. So when we talk about determinant, I'm talking about, go back to the definition. I talked about distribution, that's over. I'm now talking about distribution of diseases.
Majority of them, they are also similar with the determinant.
Okay, tell me how can you explain me that?
We categorize them as related
Hmm?
determinants. So we can take each weight.
But can you tell me, is there a relationship to it? Why is it occurring? The determinant? You're extrapolating, but you don't have this information. You need it in order to make the determinations. Now tell me, what is the linkage between this slide and the next slide? Oops. Tell me the linkages. What do you see? How do you link?
Our determinant, just initially categorizing, then just related, agent related.
You don't even need to do that. It will automatically fall in its place. You're already predetermining age. That means if the age is, a person is in the age of 25 to 35, is texting and driving. It's a pre-assumption. No, you cannot. You cannot. You have to look at the way when we present the data in terms of pattern, person, place, and time. Person is just not a single individual. It's a population. So keep in mind, the fifth slide will come up and say, this is population-based study, not individual-based study.
Even the age is one of the which is the population. Certain age.
Yes, you're absolutely right. Yeah. Yeah, one second. Let me finish up the thing. Yeah.
What he is asking is age is a determinant for something. I understand this. Here we are trying to find out then it will be a determinant. Once it is
no. Let me finish these two parts, and then we'll talk about it again. So, okay, let's talk about determinant. What are determinants? They are physical, biological, social, and cultural and behavioral factors that influence the outcome of the disease. So what is the first one? Person in the car. What one? What is it? What kind of a determinant is it? I would say physical. Because it's a physical aspect, right? The accident is physical in nature. What about the next one? Social? Yeah, social, agree, can be behavioral too. So you can go either way. So you get me, age cannot be, you can't take an age and say, this is it. There are several different aspects of loop. What is the next one? Anyone?
Cultural.
So how does it affect the transmission of disease?
Let's take an example of plague, right, with Madagascar. They have the cultural taboos to handle the state bodies and with the cultural way. So
this was taken in 2016 in Sierra Leone when there was an Ebola outbreak taking place. So when did they find the linkage as a determinant?
it's a cultural event because when those who attended the funeral or who were in contact with that, they got the
How did they come in contact with the body?
They have shared
no, so not like that. So when social death, so initially the first case was in hospital. So in the Sierra Leone, what happened? In that the doctor and the nurse both. So the nurse
This is a single-based case. We're talking about a population-based. So the culture in Sierra Leone is somebody dies of a disease, all family members gather together and they kiss the forehead. Okay, when you kiss the forehead, what have you found? A single nodal distribution is amplified. That was not known in the distribution of Ebola. So that became a significant way where once we identified it, we were able to bring down Ebola within 3 weeks by putting a ban on kissing the dead people before they're put in the coffin. Okay? So you can really call that as a cultural aspect, but many a times it's a behavioral aspect too. So when we look at behavioral scientists, it's a behavior that has been created as a result of culture. So where do you dissect between the two? So bacteria and viruses, we know they are biological. What about smoking? Behavioral, and in some schools, you start smoking because of social pressure at the age of 12, right? So let's not kind of put it in one basket and say it is behavior. It can be social pressure, right? That's one thing. And to search the determinants, what do epidemiologists typically tend to use? We use the word analytic epidemiology or epidemiologic studies to answer two questions: why and how the disease events occur. Now, I'll throw this case out to the entire class. Now that we are bought in the veterinary part, what's the first one? Running behind the car. What is that? How would you classify that? Physical. It's physical, right? Because there is an event likely to take place. Either the car will break down or the dog will have an accident. Next is viruses and bacteria, and that's clearly understood. Next one, eating off the table. Behavioral, yes. Next one is reacting to animals' behavior. It's again behavioral. So many a times when you ask a student in a clinical setting, go collect data on behavioral aspects of determinants related to a given disease, there are so many different ways you can collect the data. Okay. Now, coming back to your earlier one. Yeah, tell me now. Now that you know what determinants are, you know what distribution is, where is the question that is still bothering you?
just like classified it as it is postulated agent related and the environmental. When it comes to again environmental related, the geographical is fall down.
But you need to collect it, right? Yeah, that's the whole. My emphasis here is I'm not trying to tell you it is person, place, and time. You need information on all of those three aspects in whatever you try to do.
I feel like collecting information, I cannot take it as postulated or the agent.
You don't need to. You don't need to at this level. Yeah, you're 5 lectures ahead. So you need to calm down. Okay, any other questions? Yeah, but even there, he's still a little behind on that percent. You had a question.
That is what I was
That's
saying.
okay. So here is when you are collecting data, in order to do analytics with related to epidemiology, you must have frequency data and you must have the pattern data. Without frequency and pattern data, he may have isolated a virus, but he doesn't know which animal. He knows it's a cat. He doesn't know the age of the cat. He doesn't know the nutrition, but he has found some pneumococcus agent, and he's so fascinated by it because the thing is so pathogenic. So he's unable to publish. just because he was unable to get the metadata. For us, especially you do genomics nowadays, this becomes absolutely critical. Absolutely critical for us, especially when you're doing genomics, bioinformatics, or metagenome analysis. This becomes very relevant for us. Okay. So the word population. So I've addressed two of the terms in the definition. One is distribution, one is determinants. The next word is population. So the population refers to an identifiable characteristics based on the size, geographic location, demography of the people or animals. I worked very hard to try and find a very similar image for India. I was unable to get it. I talked to a lot of my friends, but didn't manage. But I had to retain one of the images which shows the distribution of the cat and dog owners across the years, how they are spread. So you will tend to see a lot of the dog owners tend to be more in the southern belt as compared to the cat owners are more in the north. So as an epidemiologist, what would you look at it? This tells me some numbers.
More on the start.
On the lower end, on the lower part, on the upper. What does it reflect? What does it tell us? Yes, go ahead. Yes. Not necessarily. Yeah. So in the northern region, especially in the northeast, when we look at Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, New York, upper territories, the Oregon and Washington State. Those are colder regions. And there's a tendency for cats to be more prevalent there. But as an epidemiologist, how would you think?
Maybe religious purpose.
Less likely. Less likely. Maybe, but less likely. Okay, you were saying something? Right. It's a very good way of looking at it. So if I'm going to be doing a study where I'd like to do a survey of, we call it what cat species. So where would you like to select your population? So it kind of gives you an idea. I need to focus on the Northeast because I would be able to get a better representation of the sample in order to look. But what are you doing in the process? You're biasing your data because you're only focusing on Northeast. Okay, so you need to take all of these considerations. Once you see a map, you may generate 100 ideas, but still there will be 100 ideas still left on the table before you can make it a very comprehensive, something that you can generate good data, right? So this is what we typically utilize is based on indexes, or we will look at the distribution of the population, and that becomes the starting. So especially amongst, next is, we look at the changes in population over a period of time. There's there are certain industries that change, certain occupations that change. And what are we seeing in recent years? More so people are moving to Texas and many other regions in the Midwest. So we are seeing a thinning of the population on one side and accumulating more in the South Central. Can anyone tell me what does this chart mean here? What is the chart?
Those are age groups.
There's a very specific name for it. Histogram, yes, and then maybe. What else? It's called as the population pyramid. So when we talk about a population pyramid, when we apply it, it gives us the age distribution in different age groups between males and females. Why is this very important in terms of public health? So if as an epidemiologist, I see this map and I have to release a vaccine, and I know my vaccine is very important for this age group. So I know the distribution of these individuals in that age group across the country and how best do I deliver those vaccines. I will not waste my efforts to deliver vaccines to this group because it's considered to be at a lower risk. Another thing, what would you use this particular chart is how is the population growing or receding over time? And we'll talk about population pyramids in the subsequent lecture, but keep in mind, population pyramids tells us a very nice story about the country. Okay? Usually the base, broader the base, younger the population, smaller the tip, the pyramid, very small end of the population. But if you have a very strong central piece in the center, that means it's an aging population, they're baby boomers, and very soon you have to replace them, okay? So those are some of the indications that we can use from developing population pyramids. The other aspect is looking at distribution by race and origin. Race and origin becomes very important, especially if there is an outbreak, if there's an endemicity. For example, you're a dairy producer, you're a poultry producer, and you have loss, you have losses. Where do I go and provide these funds? What particular population is at a higher risk? That will help me to go and compute those numbers. Okay? So population numbers can give us a lot more idea in terms of applying some of the epidemiologic tools and knowledges that you have gathered over time. Okay, so what are some of the So when we look at the activities of epidemiology, we can put them into 5 broad categories. The very first one, the very function of epidemiology is to allow us to identify the risk factors and the etiology. Just not what's causing the disease, but what are some of the risk factors associated with it. We start asking some of the basic questions. What is the etiological agent? How is it transmitted? Animal to animal, human to animal, animal to human, environment to animal. And what are some of the risk factors? Okay. Next is the second activity we tend to do in epidemiology is extent of the disease found in age, sex, species, geography. And the question one would be asked, why would we not need to know this? Yeah. Magnitude of the problem. And that's where it comes to your histogram or your epidemiology, or what you're talking about, presenting the data. So it becomes very important to know what's the magnitude of the problem. Whereas in etiology, the function is reduce or eliminate the exposure to risk factors. What are some of the things that you could do? We know keeping safe distance and wearing a mask and keeping a small alcohol swab with you helped you, or whether it helped or not, but that is one of the ways of preventing a risk factor, right? And becomes the very basis. If we know that there's an E. coli outbreak taking place in a dog park, how do we decontaminate? How do we put the quarantines in place? Okay. So we can use the kind of the distribution of the data, looking at the magnitude of the problem, planning for cases, maintaining drug inventories, advising the client. This becomes very important if you're in the pharmaceutical industry. You data mine these findings and say, we really need to ship these drugs to this particular part of the country where we are seeing an outbreak of a given disease. Okay, largely creating stockpiles. Where do you create these stockpiles and how do you move them around? So the third one, we need to study the natural history and prognosis of the disease. Try to develop an understanding using epidemiology. How does the disease develop? What course does it run? What are the outcomes of the disease? And why do we need to know this? Is to develop proper modes of intervention. For example, here is a chart. It shows when the start of the disease is there. At some point in time, we can do an intervention. The most easiest and least expensive of the interventions is for the onset, before from the onset to the symptoms. In other words, when the individual is in an incubation phase, that is one of the best targets you can apply. But actually, the best target, I would say, is even before the result starts. So for us, we don't have that anticipatory capability. But if you know education works, education by telling school, high school students and college students or middle school students not to smoke is a good aspect because you are modifying their behavior. Okay? Or so those are some of the things that we would encourage our asking mothers to take the children and get them vaccinated. Okay? So that's even before the onset of disease. So at every given stage, we should be able to introduce intervention processes. How well do they work? And going back, evaluating them, are they really effective? Next is the fourth one. Evaluate new preventive and therapeutic measures. Why do we need to know this? Is the drug or the vaccine effective? We really came to know very quickly when several COVID types of vaccines on different platforms were introduced. We were able to quickly hone on and say, yes, the mRNAs did work for us. Recombinant epitopes did work in some cases. So it gives us an answer to the problem. Has the educational program made a positive change in the perceptions of disease and hygiene practices? We know for sure, at least in the US, our emphasis on bombarding the students or time and time reinforcing the students about smoking that reduced the incidence of smoking by almost 17% in a matter of 5 years. That itself is an achievement. So when we look at some of those targets, epidemiology helps you come and analyze and say, is there a change or is there not a change? Because you have collected the data based on your epidemiological terms that you have utilized. Yes.
Can you explain what will be the importance of prognosis?
Which
natural history and
you will see in the next set of slides. Okay, the fifth one is provide the foundation for public policy and regulatory decisions, funding, education, and public safety. When Dr. Sherikar would go to the minister and says, I need money, he would say, why do you need it? I need the funding to develop educational programs, right, in order to prevent a disease. Or I need to improve the public safety. So those are some of the things is epidemiology allows you to generate that data, manipulate the data in the right way so that people can understand. So the language that we use in epidemiology, there's a language only epidemiologists can understand, but we can take the same language and modify it for people who are in politics, people who are, who are no previous exposure to the idea of epidemiology. So it's very important how we present the data. And epidemiology, believe it or not, plays a very strong role in the US, especially in the Food and Drug Administration. Without strong epidemiological data, they will not even assure us that there is money available for some of the programs. Okay, so let's define health. And social aspects. Yep, and spot on. So it's social well-being, okay? And how did this word creep in? There are people who like to write definitions, and all of a sudden they put the word in it, and it stays. So it so happened. Why did this happen? So when this definition was written, this was written in 1946. And what was the time frame period we were working with? Just after Second World War. And what did happen to the population in general? They were displaced. They were settled in other countries. They had no idea what was going on. And more importantly, the very basic, when we say social well-being, is just not mental, looking at ability to have food, access to shelter, access to clothes. those became the essential part. More important, education became the central aspect of social well-being. So when we look at the word social well-being is the end state of basic human needs are met and people are able to coexist peacefully in communities with opportunities for advancement. The end state is characterized by equal delivery of basic services such as water, food, shelter, and health services. In other words, there was a good movie, Roti Kapda Makan. In other words, this is nothing else. A variant of that is this is what we call as social well-being, right? The provision of primary and secondary education, that was very important. The resettlement of those who have been affected by violent conflict, Second World War, and the restoration of the social fabric and community life. So look at the word definition of health. It's just not physical and mental ability, but social well-being has to be a part of it. So quickly to recap, what's public health? So the mission of public health is the fulfillment of one society's interest. It is just not an individual's interest, it's the society or the community's interest in assuring the conditions in which people live healthy. There are 3 P's. Keep in mind, 3 P's when we talk about public health. One is prevent disease, promote health, and prepare and respond to disasters. So there are 3 P's. So if somebody asks you in an interview, what are the 3 P's of public health? Promote, preserve, and prepare. So these are the ways of how we kind of bring up different aspects and relate it to public health. Okay, so the question was, we generally, most of the times, tend to talk upon an individual case. And based on that experience with that case or that event, we try to then generalize it and say, oh, I found a dog with ulcerative gingiva and I gave it vitamin B complex for 3 days and it was cured. There may be other reasons. So based on that, you don't shoot every other dog that comes with vitamin B12. Then there has to be a different investigative process that you involve. So those are some of the things that we generally try to impress upon you with this slide. So this slide clearly tells us one thing. So when we are talking about clinical medicine, the focus is on individuals. Okay? And what is the main goal? The main goal of the physician is to diagnose and treat. Questions that they ask, what is wrong with the patient and what is the appropriate treatment. Whereas in the field of epidemiology, we focus on populations. The focus is, the main goal is to prevent and control disease. That's all we do, is prevent and control disease. And the questions we ask is, what are the leading causes of death or disability in a population? And what can be done to reduce that? Again, when we look at it, we're weaving in the concepts of prevention and control. Okay, so let me. So I'm sure many of you must have, who have taken the course in bacteriology, will have seen one of these slides, what we call as the natural history of the disease. So natural history of the disease is nothing else but the process by which disease occurs and the progress in humans and animals. The first stage, and you were kind of referring to this, I believe, the timeline below. So that's what I'll be talking about in this slide and the next slide. So here, what we call as the pre-exposure stage, in which there are factors present or leading to the problem development. For example, too much smog, too much environmental pollution. So that's what we call as pre-exposure. What is the clinical stage of exposure next? Is exposure to the causative agent, but still there are no symptoms. Okay? That is what we call as the preclinical stage. The next is the clinical stage, is when the individual starts coughing and wheezing and runny nose and slight temperature. That's when we know the individual has reached a clinical stage. And that's where the symptoms tend to develop. The next one is the stage of resolution. So the resolution can be how many types? How many types of resolution? Go ahead. Yes. Or there's a fourth one. They may not even show the clinical signs. They may receive immediately from the clinical stage, they may move off. So one is they have the clinical signs. The clinical signs may be either death, subclinical, chronic form, or persistence of the process. Other is what we call as self-resolution. So that's what we look at in the resolution stage. So as an epidemiologist, we look at it and say, where is it I can intervene? Can I intervene here? Can I intervene at this stage? Can I intervene here? 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 Definitely not here. So where do we intervene? And where do we intervene to get the maximum effect? Many times one intervention place may not be good enough. We may require two of them to be done simultaneously at a given time. So that's how the naturally of the disease helps us make those decisions. So here, let's now try to put this in a form of an example. Let's take a look at this slide and try and gaze on it a little bit. So the measurement of a disease and its determinants and the distribution in the population before, during, and after preventive and other interventions. So we have put the same population in 4 different stages. One is exposure to sufficient cause. Then there's a pathologic process that detected. Then there's clinical disease occurs. And then whether the person is able to survive or changes that occur. So at every given stage, we have a cluster of interventions. Exercise, good physical health, use of the vaccine, use of drugs, education. So usually education becomes the first and the foremost part we typically tend to apply. Where? Where will we apply education? Across the board. Every time we have to educate. But the major emphasis of education, that's a good one, is before anything starts, right? So at every stage, we will have to have interventions. So let's try and follow these arrows. So the first arrow, what we call is primary prevention. What is it? Does anybody want to pick a disease? Which one? Nobody wants to pick a disease. Then you have to pick a disease. Just kidding. Anyone? Tuberculosis. Excellent. Let's pick up TB. So what do we have? What is the primary care for tuberculosis?
Avoiding exposure to the person who is infected with it. The person who is infected, we should use mask and all that so that it will not spread.
So let's go with the first set of boxes. What is the first box? Exposure to cause, sufficient cause. Say, for example, you're going to a house and you know that there are individuals with open form of TB. What would be the first primary prevention? Is to get yourself tested, right? Either by sputum, more importantly, we have better immunological assays nowadays that are available. Hopefully you should be able to get a result. So if you're light up positive with a Montus test, but you can't do Montus test because you're already vaccinated, so the best way is to do a gamma globulin test. So you do a gamma globulin, if it lights up positive, you are then moving into the pathologic process. But how far has the pathologic process moved? Because TB is a very, very, very slow disease. Okay, so we know. So the primary prevention is using of interventions. And if it is positive, then what do we do? we start putting the individual on drugs. Has anybody heard of this term? Has anybody heard about it? Okay, good. So this, what's it? This is one of the great success stories that came out of China. China had one of the highest populations of human tuberculosis. And they started the DOTS program, and they were able to bring in their estimated rates of TB. Instead of 7 years, they were able to do it in 5 years. So those are some of the programs that we are doing in India too, and we are seeing some successes. So as a result of our, since we are mentioning about TB, what is secondary prevention? So what are the two types of TB? Go back to natural history of disease. What are the two types? Anybody? Okay, let's say pulmonary. What are the two types of pulmonary? Okay, let's have some fun. So kind of come up with a picture of a lung, the trachea and the two bronchi separating out. And here we have a nodule. The nodule is dormant. So you are in a passive stage of TB. What happens if that nodule becomes exposed to a bronchiole? It starts releasing the organism. So we call it as open and closed type TB. So generally in a year, if one individual is infected and has open type TB and is not detected, by looking at some of the modeling studies, we know that particular individual can infect 20 other people down the road, okay? So those are some of the things that we really look at in secondary prevention is it open or closed type of TB? And if it is an open type TB, then the word comes is isolation. So those are the different ways you can conjure up, coming up with different aspects. Okay? So it's very important to the natural history of the disease before we even start thinking where do we put in interventions. Okay. Anybody practicing? Anybody practicing here? Practitioners? I'm sure you. I expect a lot of practitioners in the group. People from medicine, guys. You need to talk up. Let's talk about developing a natural history of disease for obesity impacts. What will you do here? Sorry. What will you do here, 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 here? For obesity. Nutrition is one. One is the selection of the breed itself. Okay. So many a times, if a husband and a wife has a small child, they need to be educated first. There are certain breeds that are at a higher predilection of developing arthritis and obesity, sometime around the age of 6 and 7, even if you do all other things together. So that's the first thing that we do is education of the clientele. Next is you start seeing obesity. What do? Diet and exercise. Right? Further down, what else? Here. What's the next stages?
Yes, okay.
We're talking about one dog. I'm looking at a population plan. Give me 1,000 dogs. Okay, so keep in mind, that's a good way of looking at it. I mean, that's a great question, but it's at a clinical setting. we are really looking at a population level. Any other ideas? What else? What's it? Nutrition. Nutrition becomes very, very important part of it. Another is owner's compliance. We tend to
Maintenance.
Maintenance. Okay, good point. Very good point. Yep. So when we look at it, when you, as a physician, if a dog comes to your clinic, you know at which stage the dog is, and what is the appropriate approach to take. So again, bringing it back to a clinical setting for you to understand it a little better. So I'm going to move on and talk about the second aspect. That's the history of epidemiology. Do you want to take a break, or we can start after lunch? It's 1:06. We'll do after lunch. All agree? No, we need to announce to the online people.
Two things are there.
Yeah.
Secondary prevention. Prevention of secondary cases.
For prevention, we should take information as possible. Distribution of the cycle. And if it comes to the question of moving beyond, what would be hospitalization? First step in education, vaccines.
बोल रहे सर करूँगे तो ना या श्योर हाँ नहीं ठीक है ओके that our break we will meet at 2 o'clock. Okay, so online participants now, if miss, because sir has finished module 1 first chapter, so now if you have any questions you can ask. We will break for lunch, but till that time if you have any questions you can ask here, or you can put it in the chat box. We will have a discussion after lunch. Yes, so after the lunch there will be, again you can ask online, or you can put it in the chat box. Okay, we will break for lunch and we will meet at 2 o'clock. Okay, thank you.
For what?
Preventing it.
That's
these are the three words.
Where do you want to prolong your life? When it's not going to live. You know that your clock is infected with influenza. Why the hell do you want to prolong its life?
So what prolonging terms they might be using it, considering the prevention and control, what we are putting it. Promote activate. These are the 2 words initially we added. The third word from understanding. So when we have actually this,
It's actually
we can able to
more important is to prepare for it. Need to be prepared. If somebody throws a case and you say, you don't know. So, but if you're prepared, you're more likely to do a better job. Preparation becomes essential.
Certain period, like in
I'll come to. I'll talk about everything. Yeah. Thank you. You'll have a great time, don't worry. John Snow pieced together the evidence explaining the occurrence of cholera epidemics in London. So what did he do? His hypothesis or his logic that he applied was epidemics follow routes of commerce. Agent is free living. Even at that point, there was still no publicly available widespread use of microscopes, because in 1863, it was the first time when our Louis Pasteur was able to show something on a slide. So his concept was it was free living and multiplies in the host. And his observation, that was his hunch, transmission is waterborne, spread via fecal contamination, and the water is ingested orally. A lot of things to digest. Okay, so let's see what he really did. Am I able to move this? Okay, so what he did was he compared cholera rates by regions, different regions in London. And in modern terms, what we are looking at, it's called as ecologic analysis. So, and you will be doing ecologic analysis in the class. Then what did he do next? He compared the cholera rates in exposed and non-exposed individuals. And what is that? You have one group that's exposed, another group that's non-exposed. You follow them over a period of time and to see whether they develop the disease or don't develop the disease. Okay, so that's what we call as cohort analysis. And the third one, which he did, even without knowing that he was doing the case control analysis, is comparing the exposure history in cholera cases versus non-cases. So even today, we have to use this as a part of our any type of analysis we do. We follow the same procedures and protocols that he had laid out. And how did he? Can you move me to the next slide? Okay, perfect. Can I blow this up? Okay, so he, as I mentioned earlier, when you compare by regions, he did an ecological study. The second was a cohort, and the third was a case control. So the way he did was he collected all of the data. He collected all of the data in terms of which are the different regions of London that receive water. One, what was their population, the denominator, how many number of deaths that occurred, and how many number of deaths that occurred for every 100,000 living individuals. And side by side, when we say we need metadata, he was able to identify these set of places. The Southport Water Company only provided water to these neighborhoods, that's South Hall and Vauxhall. Then we had another group of is where the Lambeth Company supplied to another set of districts. That's Norwood, Stratham, and Dulwich. And what did he do when he compared these two different places? He found that the rates were very different. So when you looked at Southwark, there was 1,226 cases. There were 40,000 homes, and the rate of number of people who died was 315 per 10,000. Now, when we compare to the Lambeth, that's another water company, he found there were only 98 cases, and there were 26,000 homes, and there were only 37 deaths. So what did he do? He calculated the rate for Southwark. That includes 1,226 divided by the denominator, 40,000 homes. That was equivalent to 0.25 or 315 per 10,000. So he was able to show the water is the likely source through which this cholera agent is spreading through Southwark. Okay. Further, he didn't stop there. He did a case control study. So what did he do? He went to one of the most highly affected areas. That's the area around the Broad Street pump. So the map shows here a very high concentration of cases in and around Broad Street. And what did he do? He went to every house and he said, how many number of people staying here? Where do you get your water from? How many people have died? So among 61 cases, 61 that used the Broad Street water, 6 did not, and 6 were uncertain. Amongst non-cases, Broad Street water was rare. And very interesting anecdote. Amongst non-cases in the brewery, men were allowed to take a certain amount of malt liquor. And the proprietor, I believe, they drank only the liquor, but not the water. So it's an interesting finding, but we cannot exclude those observations. So the non-case at workhouse had a separate water source. So what did he do? How do I stop people from drinking water? What did he do was he went and convinced the local municipality. After a long heated debate, they said, okay, we will allow you to take away the handle on the pump where people come to take the water. We will take it off for 7 days, and then we will watch if the number of cases of cholera drop. Luckily, that happened. By a simple intervention, by removing the handle, deaths due to cholera dramatically decreased. So these are some of the things that we go back and say, oh, okay, we did ecological study. We were able to identify the source of water. We then did a cohort study, and then there was associated with groups and non-groups. And then finally, I did a case control study where I found if I remove the handle, I'm able to bring the disease under control. Okay. Okay, so let's go on and talk about John Snow, the pump. So I've been teaching epidemiology for almost 21 years. And in my class, I tell my students during the spring break, why don't you go to London? There's a cheap flight, and I would tell them what cheap flights are available. Why don't you go to London, have a good time for 1 week and come back? But I need one thing in request is a picture from you. So they used to send me pictures of them in front of John Snow. By the way, the place is very nice. It's very clean. Sorry. So this is one of my students, Nate Jacobs, who is finishing up his PhD in Harvard. He went there and took these pictures. The next picture is Shubhada. She is a graduate of, Rahul knows her very well. So Shubhada is finished her PhD with me. She is actually a graduate from Pondicherry, and then she did her master's in Gadwasu, and then she came and joined my lab, and she worked on looking at the NSP1 protein genes of the avian influenza. So now she is moving to Pittsburgh. So this is Aileen Santiago. Aileen was a PhD undergraduate student in my lab. She got into the DVM program in the Royal Vic Veterinary College. So she said, Bhushan, I got a picture for you. And of course, I have many other pictures, but let me show you the last one. Last one is Liam. Liam is a student in my class, this class, who graduated. So he was in London. He took a picture. So you guys, if you guys go to London, send me a picture it'll be there in this collection up here. Okay. Okay. Final piece to the puzzle. Final piece to the puzzle was the theory of the germ disease, the germ theory disease. So once it was caused, people were under the impression it is caused by evil spirits. But in 1864, Louis Pasteur was able to conclude that microorganisms were present in air and was associated with silkworm disease in that population. But in 1876, Robert Koch was able to identify the causative agent of Mycobacterium tuberculosis. Okay, followed with these two important observations, when we look at the combined work of these people, or what we call as the golden age of microbiology, the work of Pasteur and Koch ushered the science of microbiology and led to the advances in immunology, sanitation, and hygiene that have done more to increase the lifespan of humans than any other scientific advance in the past 1,000 years. The simple experiments, simple ideas could make significant differences. Okay, let's come on to this very famous person. So Richard Dahl, again, by physician, by training, didn't really want to practice. He sat in his lab and started crunching numbers, looking at the British historical records. But he was really focused upon, does smoking cause cancer? He was singularly focused on that. He wanted to see if there is a relationship between the two. So he's a pioneer in research linking smoking to health problems. With other researchers, he was credited with being the first one to prove that smoking caused lung cancer and increased the rate of heart disease. So let's try and understand what he actually did. So he and his colleague, what we call as the Dahl and Hill study, which was done in 1954, trying to explain a very basic understanding. Does smoking cause cancer? And can we generate a hypothesis? So what did they do? So when we look at the British history system or the record system, they're one of the most immaculate records, very perfect records. And that's a dream, a wet dream for an epidemiologist to have correct, good metadata with them. So here they were able to find, based on their hospital records, they said, let's look at two groups of individuals. The first group of individuals are those that died of lung cancer. And if they died of lung cancer, did they smoke or did not smoke? Then they looked at those individuals who died of other diseases and whether they smoked or did not smoke. That was the driver to understand, is there any difference? In order to prove it, we utilized a 2x2 table. So believe me, 2x2 tables will be there for the next 8 lectures. So I'll be wanting you with this 2x2 table. Okay. So in this 2x2 table, they took those numbers. And what did they do? They computed the numbers in such a way. The first box here, which comprises of 647 individuals, were those who used to smoke and had developed lung cancer. Whereas there were 622 individuals with other diseases who were also smokers. Then we had individuals that had lung cancer, but they were not smokers. There were only 2 of them, where there were 27 of them that were non-smokers and had other diseases. Did a very simple thing. It's like a 4-year-old trying to play around when you give him a math book. He cross-multiplied these numbers and came up with a number called as 1404. What does that mean? 1404. What does it tell us?
The exchange of risk with the exposed population.
The smokers have risk 14 times more of lung cancer than.
You're all on the same page. Thank you. That's the real answer is what you're trying to calculate is the risk of smoking. The odds are 14 times more higher of developing cancer as compared to those who are non-smokers. You have to have that qualified. You just can't say smokers as compared to non-smokers. If you don't use that, you'll get a 0. You need to get as compared to non-smokers. But does it make clear? Okay, good. So he went on further. Say here he wanted to really develop a correlation study. Is the more you smoke, are you at higher risk of developing cancer? So what did he do? He enrolled lung cancer mortality rates amongst British doctors, and which rose to increase on the number of cigarettes they smoked per day. So in other words, he was trying to develop a dose-response relationship. So what did he find? Non-smokers, if you people who did not smoke, the likelihood was 0.1 per 1,000 individuals. For those who smoked 10 cigarettes a day, it was 0.8. Those who smoked 20 cigarettes, it was 1.5. So you can see, the more you're likely to smoke, you're increasing your odds of developing lung cancer. So here, this is a case study that we'll be doing tomorrow. Umesh is going to be coming and joining with me. So tomorrow afternoon, we will spend doing this case study. So let's talk about this case study. Dr. Umesh Karkare, on a hunch, at 3 a.m. in the morning, like many insomniac people like Umesh and me, gets up at morning 3 o'clock, logs onto his clinical files to figure out why the practice is seeing an unusual number of cases, highly suggestive colonic dysbiosis of methamphetamine. He's amazed to see that from January to December 21, he had 73 cases for the same period. In January to December 22, he had 146 cases, suggestive colonic dysbiosis. So what does Umesh do? He sets up a virtual meeting with his practicing veterinarians in his practice. And then he realizes there's something wrong. And that's always, you first put out the data and then say, I think there's something wrong. It's not unusual, right? So we will discuss this case study with you all, and we would like you to provide us with an input. And in order to do that, I will be uploading 2 publications. One publication that looks at colonic impaction in dogs, a retrospective study. Another is looking at gastrointestinal motility and disorders and gastrointestinal prokinetic therapy. So these are the 2 papers we'd like you to read. Ultimately, we use all of this information to what we typically call as developing a case definition. Any disease, whether non-infectious or infectious disease, has to have a very strong case definition. Unless and until your case definition is rigorous, and that helps you in the process of actually picking up the real cases, eliminating the ones that are not cases, or including those that you accidentally bring in, even if they are cases. You forget them because they are cases. So the case definition becomes very, very important. So you send your graduate student out and say, collect this data for me. But what's the case definition? What is he going to work upon? Right?
We did it last few months back. I asked them to collect the data related with the biosecurity measures taken by the farmers.
Right.
Yeah. And relevant because they are on leave.
Right.
I asked them to collect the data. So what we did, we prepared the questionnaire. That was an open questionnaire we prepared in the class. Students supposed to give their own questions. So we collected that. And we framed one questionnaire, and that we prepared a Google form of it. And student has to go over there. He has to give that geographical location, his selfie with the farm, and the data I have right now.
Good. Did you do beta
I
test?
still not analyzed it.
No, have you done a beta test of the question?
No.
Okay, so what we'll be doing is utilizing these 2 papers and collecting some of the information that Umesh has given, and then we'll come up with a case definition in order for a clinician to use or a researcher to use on his research applications. Okay, so that's where we are here today. We can take another 5-minute break, and then I will move on to the next chapter. Okay.
not aware of how to that test. That one you suggest suggesting.
Yeah, so the beta test, what you do is you take your questionnaire and then you implement that questionnaire to the population that you're going to expect to respond and to a population that is not going to respond. And it has to be very specific for the level of education to which you're asking for. So, based on that. And then we go and see, we do dummy variable analysis to say question number 35, is it behaving the way we would expect it to behave? If 99% of them say no to it, do you really want that to be in your final questionnaire? Not really. So those are some of the things that you need to eliminate in the process. And many times it becomes redundant. Everybody will say no. And why do you put the question in the first place, right? So that's why beta testing becomes very important in order to eliminate some of these biases that you're inducing, because you feel that's necessary to ask. But in reality, it's not generating, or you may have to go back and modify the question to such a way that will elicit a response. Okay, we'll take a 5-minute break and then we'll switch over to one more lecture and then I'll stop. The spread of the epidemic infection. So in order to do that, what does he do? What? Oh, we're too far away from that. That's a good way of looking at it. But what questions does he ask? You're pretty close. Okay. So he has to ask a series of questions in order to elicit the right kind of response. Who are sick? Who are not sick? So the first thing is he's taking the population for many years. Next is, what is causing the disease? Now he gets the information, this is invasive. Okay, we know there may be some group of organisms, maybe associated. When did it occur? Did it occur during a party? Or did it occur in isolated cases? Did it occur in a hospital? That's when and where did it occur? And then the final question is why and how. That is, we utilize why and how in terms of analytical. Here we are trying to basically find who, what, where, and where. In other words, person, place, and time. That's the data we need all the time to start off an epidemiology investigation. Once we have the data, we use that to generate a hypothesis. And then we test the hypothesis, asking the questions why and how. Or we can say why or how can do the same thing, or how we present it as is. Okay? So the core functions. So if you are expecting your students to take up the field of epidemiology, the core function of an epidemiologist is public health surveillance, is monitoring for diseases in a community. For example, if you're an LDO and your government sends you a sheet, go around the village and let me know how many cattle, sheep, and goat are positive for FMD, or how many have been vaccinated. Okay, so those are some of the things in terms of surveillance at a community. Next is investigation, outbreak of a disease. If there's an outbreak of a disease, how do you do an investigation? How do you analyze data, especially when it comes to surveillance data? Every month I get data from many different hospitals giving me trends of the flu that is going on. When is it going to peak? Can I go and predict that this is going to peak this time in the month of October? Then usually we tend to see in November. Is the data suggestive of that? So that is what an epidemiologist typically tends to do. Another is evaluation of disease control programs and interventions. It's just not we are interested in intervention and prevention and control. We are more interested in seeing if our intervention and control practices are working. That's very important, especially if you have developed a vaccine. or if you've developed a medication, you've developed a teaching program, or a quarantine process, are these giving you the results that you are expecting? Is there a decline in the number of diseases? Is there a break in the cycle of the diseases? That's what we do in terms of evaluation. More importantly, is communication with stakeholders. Is who are your stakeholders? Stakeholders is, for us as veterinarians, it is the agricultural community. Now we have expanded the concept in terms of One Health. It's not only the agricultural community, it's human health, and also ecologists to take care of the environmental systems. Okay? So classic examples that I have here is West Nile virus resistance to antimicrobials. These are some of the surveillance programs that we typically tend to do in the US. Outbreak of salmonella during 7th of July in Sunset Park. He knows where it is. You've forgotten? No. Effectiveness of spraying for mosquito populations. I've sprayed for mosquito populations, and after a period of 4 weeks, am I seeing the number of cases of malaria lower as compared to the previous year? Okay. You have to have been having a measurement, right? As compared to the previous year, am I seeing lower cases? Inform physicians, veterinarians, and policymakers on the outcome of the disease findings. That's communication. It's one of the outputs that we typically go and say, BA5.5 COVID vaccine is needed for anybody above the age of 65. So that's an important communication that we sent out to physicians. Okay. Evaluating the effectiveness of new drug or prevention of heart attacks. You may have developed a drug and you would like to assess whether it's really giving the effects that the company is claiming. So here, let me bring you to the idea, because this is one of the areas where, as veterinarians, we don't tend to do a good job because we don't have an ICD to begin with. So I have brought out the concept of the ICD is nothing else but International Classification of Disease. The purpose of ICD is to allow the systematic recording, analysis, and interpretation and comparison of mortality and morbidity data collected from different countries or areas at different times. ICD is used to translate diagnosis of diseases and other health problems into alphanumeric codes. So all your data set that you generate becomes into an alphanumeric code that allows storage, retrieval, and analysis of data. So it's very important for international standardized diagnostic comparisons, analysis of general health situations or populations, monitoring the incidence and prevalence of disease, and studies of financial aspects of the health building, such as billing and resources. So here is a link. Let me walk you through this link up here. Let me see if it opens.
The definition is very close to the GIS. Definition of the GIS. Retrieval and all that frames.
I don't think so. Maybe you're right, but I've not looked at it. Okay, so here what we do is, here are the disease classifications. You can see based on the classifications. Let's kind of click on one of them. Let's say infectious. They have, let's click on this one up here. We have neoplasms, disease of the nervous system. No, sorry. Oops. Where did it kick me out? So here in the process, you can go and classify the diseases. So if a physician finds that there is colitis of infectious origin, it gets an alphanumeric code of a certain type. For example, pneumonia, it is CA40. If I say if it is CA40, then world across, we know what we are talking about. Okay? We don't need to send 20 pages of report. So those are some of the things that are what we say as the way for classifying, billing, retrieving of the money, and then prescribing what are the additional tests we need to be doing. So everything is locked on to these numbers. So as a part of a test, I've given this for you guys to go and click on this website and draw down the information to figure it out, okay? So this is a good starting point to understand why do we need to emphasize on case definitions. Let's click on this. So here is the kind of definition: a disease of meninges caused by lymphocytic choriomeningitis virus. The disease is characterized by various conditions, and it tells us what is the way it is transmitted and how it has to be diagnosed, okay, in a very succinct manner. Do I go back to this? You want me to? Okay, cool. So that comes on to the process of what we call as case definition. So how do I close this? This
Screen. Upper arrow, sir.
This one?
Yeah. Arrow.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. So case definition. So when we talk about case definitions, why is it important? Let's first talk about that. The case definition has to be simple, very simple by itself. People tend to make it complicated. That's where things get redundant or doesn't move. Second, it has to be sensitive. That means more inclusive during the early phases of the outbreak, because we don't know the magnitude of it. We don't know the full clinical manifestations occurring. So what do we do when we develop a case definition? We keep it loose, a little bit looser. But as we advance and know more about the disease, we make it specific, where it becomes more restricted during the analytic phase of the outbreak and investigation. Okay. So case definition is a set of standard diagnostic criteria that must be fulfilled in order to identify a person or a case with a particular disease. Why do we need these definitions? To accurately classify people or persons or animals who have ill, and more importantly, standardize the reporting. So if you're reporting from Akola and I'm reporting from Parbani, we need to be comparing the same numbers, right? So that's very, very important here, and that's what ICD helps us to do it. When do we use case definitions? We use case definitions for things such as routine surveillance outbreak, flu season, outbreak investigations for foodborne illnesses, vaccine trials. Case definitions may vary for a given disease depending on the purpose of collection of the data. Okay. So this is a standard case definition structure. 3 parts. It has to have 3 parts. The first part comprises of symptoms, clinical signs. Here in this case, fever of greater than 104, inflamed throat, enlarged tonsils and lymph nodes, running nose, itchy eyes, shallow and fast breathing, and chest congestion. So these are the clinical symptoms of what we got a cluster of signs that you're looking for. Next is laboratory results, such as X-rays, blood work, and what does the blood work tell us? And if there is a PCR confirmation test, what does it tell us? Next is the epidemiologic data in terms of person, place, and time, age, sex, and occupation. Is this person all the time indoors? Is it outdoors? Does he work with animals? Okay. What kind of an occupation does he have? Does he work as a ticket collector in a metro station? That means, his risk is so very high, right? Hospital. Where are we seeing this? In the hospital wards, dormitories, nursing homes, kennels, and what time of the year? Is it summer, winter, or monsoon? Right? So based on this, let us look at a case definition for measles. So the case definition for measles here is an illness characterized by all of the following: a generalized rash lasting for greater or equal to 3 days. So if you are a clinician and you are sitting with a patient and you're looking for measles, there has to be a generalized rash that is more than 3 days, 2 to 3 days, or say 2 to 4 days. You can give yourself a little bit of biological variation to yourself and say 3 to 4 days. A temperature greater than 101 degrees Fahrenheit, signs of cough, coryza, and conjunctivitis. What is coryza? Runny nose, what else? Crud in the eye, crud in the nose. Okay, that are the typical signs of coryza. Inflamed parotid glands. Those are the typical signs that we attribute to coryza or conjunctivitis. Now, what we have in terms of laboratory diagnosis: positive serological tests for measles, immunoglobulin and antibodies. And then when we do a paired antibody test, rise in measles antibody level by any standardological serological assay. Now the question comes to the physician: how do I classify this disease? Case definition. So suspected, it becomes, you call the individual or the patient suspect, or the group of individuals suspect. Any febrile illness accompanied by rash. Two characteristics: temperature and rash. That person, individual, becomes susceptible for measles, or what we call as not susceptible, suspected for measles. The second is probable. A case that meets the clinical definition that has non-contributory or no serological or virological testing and is epidemiologically linked, again, the word epidemiologically linked to the confirmed case. So that's where we will call it as probable. Right? The last one is confirmed. A case that is laboratory confirmed by means of a clinical case definition and epidemiologically linked to the case. A laboratory confirmed case does not meet the clinical case definition. So it's very important that we have all of the pieces together to say it is confirmed. Why do we need to do that? Why do we need to classify them as probable, suspect, and confirmed? What's it?
To plan the intervention.
One, that's a very good way of looking. One is planning interventions. Another is following up people. If you have people in the suspect group and the probable group, you don't tell them you go home. Okay, you go home, but you need to come back every day or every other day just to follow up and see what's going on. And when it is confirmed, you have a proposed treatment protocol that you can use at that point in time. So it becomes very important to develop the classification based on clinical and laboratory data that is linked to the epidemiological data. Right? I have one for rabies too. Rabies is very simple. The way we can classify is confirmed or probable. So when we say confirmed, you've detected the viral antigen and an appropriate clinical specimen by immunofluorescence or detection of rabies nucleic acid. And the probable is clinical compatible signs and symptoms with the following results: demonstrated a rabies neutralizing antibody titers of 0.5 IUs per ml for complete neutralization, and the serum CSF of an unvaccinated person. So this becomes a lot more easier for us in order to do data analytics. If you don't put them into these categories, it becomes a mess, virtually to make meaning out of it. Let me tell you an interesting history about rabies. My job as the director of Penn State Lab is, from the public health aspect, is any case that comes positive for rabies. I'm the one who's supposed to pick up the phone and make the call and tell the owner, it's just your dog or your whatever sample you submitted is positive for rabies. So I believe this was in my very first week of joining the diagnostic lab. A report came in, and and it was positive for rabies. It was a raccoon head submitted by a farmer. So I picked up the phone and called the farmer and said, hey, the raccoon head that you submitted is positive for rabies. You need to take post-vaccine treatment. And I said, he just said, uh-oh. I said, what happened? He said, oh, doc, I cut off the head. I put the head in a box. I sent it to your lab and I grilled the raccoon and I ate it. He said, and of course, it's a common practice. Back in the rural areas, they grill a squirrel and a rabbit or whatever is in the backyard. It's a part of a dinner. So he grilled this raccoon and ate the damn raccoon. Now, should I tell him, do I kill myself or are you going to die very soon? I have to very clearly tell him, look, you ate it. You should have talked to us first. It's most likely you've consumed some parts in the spinal cord, which I have no guarantee you've not done it. But if I were you, I would take an appointment with your local primary healthcare physician to get the shots for you and your family. If your family's eaten the raccoon too. He said, I have some left in my fridge. I said, no, keep it. So these are some interesting episodes as working as a diagnostician. You come across cases like this. Now, if I tell him that you are a confirmed case for rabies, he's not going to totally understand. But for us, it makes a lot of difference, right? So I have another one for parvovirus. I will not go much in detail. And now is the area where let's talk a little bit, spend some time here and try and understand this, because this lays out what, when we move further down, to talk about the relationships between infectivity, virulence, and pathogenicity. So when we talk about the core concepts, we have to address 5 different things. One is the reservoir, the portal of exit, the mode of transmission, the portal of entry, and the susceptible host. Why? Why do we need to look at each of those aspects?
Very important.
This good way is to find, is there a weak link in the transmission of the disease, and where is it we can intervene? Okay, so let's try and expand on that. So generally, when we talk about the reservoir, the portal of exit, the mode of transmission, the portal of entry, and the new host. Okay, and when we talk about the portal of exit, our best chance is to prevent the pathogen from leaving the reservoir. That is that if you can do that, great. Okay. Next is, how do we prevent the pathogen from entering the new host, right? And another way of looking at it is, what is it I can do in order to modify the mode of transmission so that I can prevent it even for it to become, go into the next phase. Okay? So let's talk about what do we mean by a reservoir. So reservoir, nidus, the several different terms that we tend to use. So reservoir is nothing else but a natural habitat of the agent. Example, soil. What is the natural habitat of the soil? Of soil. What is the natural habitat? What pathogen do you normally see in the soil? Clostridium group of organisms. Okay, so Clostridia is what we call as a soil-borne pathogen. Okay, so here in this case, when we look at carriers, an apparently healthy asymptomatic carriers such as Salmonella, Pneumocystis carni, antibiotic resistance. So individuals or animals may carry the pathogens but never actually show the signs of a disease. Next is incubatory. They are carrying the infectious agent, and it's at that point in time that they are highly disseminated in the process. Measles, HIV, foot and mouth disease. It is during the incubatory phase that the pathogens are leaving the portal of exit. Okay. Next is convalescent carriers, Salmonella, antibiotic resistant bacteria. Although they are I now will bring in the two terms, clinically cure and bacteriologically cure. So a clinician will say, clinically cured, perfectly fine. The dog is jumping around, the horse is walking around. I don't need to worry. But we have never really gone back and said, is this bacteriologically cured? So many a times it so happens they may become anti-resistant to antibiotics. Okay? And they may become proliferations of the antibiotic resistance on the farm. So those are some of the things that we would say as a convalescent carrier, the story doesn't end just because the individual or individuals have recovered from an infectious disease. Now there is chronic carriers, hepatitis B and Mycobacterium tuberculosis. And below I've provided you with some of the examples. And I typically ask my students to provide me with one or two examples of some of the reservoirs for humans, animals, soil, and water. And invariably, I never get the right answer because perhaps that's an indication that they have not really spent time looking at that slide. So keep in mind, you want to play around with them, use that set of box there, and you'll be so happy. Okay, just kidding. So carrier state, let me introduce you to a lady. Who is this? Mary Mallon. Okay, so she worked in New York in the 1900s, and she was a cook in 53 houses. And wherever she would go, people would fall sick or die. So the local police put her in a confinement, okay, because she was a carrier of Salmonella typhi. So she was confined to a given place between 1907 and 1910. She escaped. And even after escaping, she infected 200 people on the road. So it's an interesting case, but it really tells us convalescence doesn't really matter unless and until you've gone back and tested I'm negative for it. So we have finished the portal, the reservoirs. Now we will talk about the portals of exit. So the portals of exit, many pathogens generally tend to follow a fairly generalized pattern of exiting the host. For example, respiratory pathogens, influenza viruses and tuberculosis through the droplets, air droplets, or a cough. Alimentary tract is the foodborne pathogens. Urogenital is E. coli and HIV. Percutaneous is mainly protozoal organisms such as Plasmodium. And then, of course, Bacillus anthracis through multiple exits. So the next aspect, let me go back. Maybe I may not talk about. So here are some images about anthrax. So I have a huge project in Tanzania where we are looking at the geospatial distribution of anthrax in lower Serengeti of Tanzania. So I'll talk to you about that a little bit in detail when we talk in the subsequent slides. So remind me and I'll talk to you about it. So transmission by vehicle, when we look at vehicle, we can put them into three categories. Primary vehicle, secretions of the body fluids, as you can clearly see here, traveling in an SD bus, a poor mother, the baby is crying. What should she take? She takes a pallu, cleans the nose, ready to infect 10 other people, right? Or 10 other children. No, that's mother's instinct. But nobody really knows what's really going to happen next. So that's what we call as primary vehicle. No, but her pallu becomes the secondary vehicle, right? So it's an inanimate object that is contaminated with a primary vehicle. Using you're on the lift, you're sneezing and coughing, or somebody else before you, just press the button and you hit the same floor. Pathogens on your hand. Whether you develop the disease or not is a different story, but you're exposed. The last one is when we talk about vectors. So vectors, largely we focus on invertebrates. And the way we then put the whole picture together from the infected host to the susceptible host, either the pathogen can travel as a primary vehicle, a secondary vehicle, or through vectors. Now, on the next slide, let me make this a lot more complicated. Okay. So when we talk about direct transmission, indirect transmission, and vector-borne transmission, here are some of the examples I like to use when we talk about infectious diseases. For example, direct transmission, contact ringworms. When do we typically get ringworms? When you're working with cats. Okay? So that's one of the areas. Or many times you have used somebody else's clothes. You go to, you're really wet, you come out and your friend says, hey, share my shirt with you. And it so happens you develop ringworm. Next is venereal mycoplasmas. That's an issue with dogs. We seem to see a lot. So also with dairy cattle. In utero transmission, that is from the mother to the fetus. And toxoplasma is again from the mother to the fetus in the cat. Now, the indirect observations here, we can put them into three categories: vehicles, airborne, and ingestion. Whereas when we look at the vector-borne diseases, tends to become a lot more complicated, especially mechanical vector-borne transmission, biological, transovarian, and transstadial transmission. Okay, so again, it depends on the pathogen or the parasitic agent and the host that is carrying the pathogen. Largely determines the way we look at it. Infectious diseases that are transmitted by more than one means. There are several of them. I will not touch upon these. I'm sure these must be pretty germane to you. For example, tularemia. We're really worried about tularemia because Francisella tularensis is classified as a biological safety level 3 pathogen. Okay? Now they're trying to bring it down to level 2, but even today it is considered as a level 3 pathogen. Bite, how is it transmitted through bite, contact, and inhalation? We talk about plague, bite of rotting fleas, and infected persons through the respiratory route. The worst of the lot is anthrax and brucellosis to begin with. You contact through butchering, the consumption of meat, and inhalation of spores. And in case of brucellosis, contaminated milk, fetus, and infectious animals. Talking about anthrax, the way we started our project in anthrax was there were several outbreaks that took place in the lower Serengeti. And we wanted to develop a surveillance system as to where do we go and collect these samples, how effectively we collect these samples, and what are our odds of finding Bacillus anthracis in it. So we utilized the help of the rangers and GIS mapping systems to go and look at animal movements. How do these animals move? They don't move randomly. They move in a certain path and a trajectory from one place to another place. So we were able to get those routes through the GIS mapping and through the rangers. And when we started watching those videos, we found something very interesting. A small section of the herd is about 15, 20, 30, or nearly 100 feet away from the main herd. They're walking slowly behind the bigger group. And it is the place where they come closer to the watering place. It's the highest place where we tend to get the largest number of spores per gram of soil sample, because that's where they tend to admix. And the ones that are coming late in the group are the carriers. They are not as proficient enough to move as quickly as the rest because they are sick or they are subclinically sick. So they become excellent sources of sample collection. And we know because of that, we were able to identify areas in and around the watering places and then put confinement zones around it so that the animals wouldn't go over a period of time before we decontaminate the soil with lime. So these are some of the interventions, but we needed to know the geospatial distributions and which animals we could target over a period of time. Okay, another is pathogens can also be transmitted through transfusions, okay, and also through perinatal passages. Something very interesting is Treponema cruzi, which is called as Chagas disease. And this is called as a kissing bug. It usually typically comes in the night and tries to bite. It prefers the eyelid for some reason, and there is blepharitis or swelling of the upper eyelid. It's very painful, but easily treated by things like tetracycline and others. Okay. Entry of the host. So the portal of entry must have an incubation period. Respiratory viral pneumonias, gastroenteroviruses, conjunctiva, percutaneous, that is arboviruses, and of course, reproductive is venereal diseases. When we talk about the susceptible host, all previous processes influence the exposure to the agent. So just quickly to summarize. So these are some of the natural history of the disease. That means if there's an infection, the outcomes, how do we measure those outcomes? Outcomes can be acute with recovery to long-term immunity. We tend to see that in measles, mumps, rubella, diphtheria. Acute with some chronic carriers, chlamydia, trachomitis, acute diseases without carrier stage, strep A, syphilis, Lyme disease, chronic carriers, schistosoma infections have become an issue, Helicobacter pylori, and of course, chronic carriers that may develop cancer, especially the Epstein-Barr virus, EBV, and causing of nasopharyngeal carcinoma, and the Kaposi sarcoma, HHV8. And what's so important about Kaposi sarcoma? Anybody heard of this word as it relates to AIDS? That was the first signatures people started seeing in gay men is developing of Kaposi sarcoma, which we tend to see in very elderly patients. We don't see in homosexual individuals. So when Kaposi sarcoma started coming up, that was the first clue that there is something wrong with the immune system. That was the first hint, especially when they started looking for the human papillomavirus 8. And that led to the understanding that in addition to this, there's something else going on. So I will stop here. I think I've taken a lot of your time, and we'll regroup tomorrow. So please read those two papers. Umesh will join us in the afternoon, and we will do the case study. We will upload the papers now. As soon as I go home, I'll do all of it. Maybe by between 7 and 8 in the evening. Okay. Any questions? Any things you want me to change? Anything you want me to do differently?
In the subsequent lecture, the difference between epidemiologic modeling and disease modeling.
So epidemiologic models are models, but disease modeling is the last, where we'll actually compute the model. You will be doing a high marks. I can guarantee you that much. You will enjoy more so. You will enjoy it. It's up to you whether you would like to use it or make modifications. Choice is yours.
Questions from the online participants? So
please put it on the chat.
Yeah, please put it in the chat box. So sir,
we'll start tomorrow at 10 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah. Chat box.
So Mishra, he's also co-PI of the project.
Okay.
So feel free to ask the questions. It's a good interactive sessions going on. So any questions from the online participants?
What's it?
I think assessment of exposure. It's long back. Currently for these sessions, I think there is no any questions typed in the chat box. I hope we're audible to the online participants?
Mishra, can you also ask them if there's anything else we need to be doing for better understanding of the material?
Yeah, so I guess the training is going on, and Jairav sir is, also, we are very happy to over here. And any participants would like to share their views, thoughts, or any suggestions, any modifications. So we will be very happy for that. Any suggestions regarding the training sessions going on for your better understanding? I think it's going very perfect.
So we'll close the today's session.
So here today we're closing the today's session, and tomorrow morning sharp at 10 o'clock we'll again gather together. So thanks for the day. Thank you so much.